Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. Ladies and gentlemen, you are tuned to the MC Lars podcast. It is Monday, December 9th. This is episode 67. I just got back from Fandom Fest in Fort Myers, Florida, where I performed a bunch of selections from Dewey Decibel System with Mega Ran. And today I am talking to Brian Mazzaferri of I Fight Dragons. Their new album, Canon Eyes, is out today. They did it through Patreon, where they just charged all their fans for the album. Everyone could sign up and get the updates. And then when the album was out, they got to pay back all their recording bills. So that's a really creative and innovative way of doing it. It's a very long episode, so I'm going to keep the introduction short. But Brian has always been ahead of the curve. Great guy, great friend, great father, great songwriter, great collaborator. And it was really great to talk to him because I've always wanted to have him on the podcast. We recorded it at the Player Omega, which was the Warped Tour Gamer Festival I did in Los Angeles a few weeks ago. This week's episode is brought to you by the following Patreon Larsons, the new ones. Shout out to Andrew Davis, Jesse, and Marcy. Shout out to the old ones, Molly, Brandon, and Mitchell. Thank you all very much for your support and for making this podcast possible and for allowing me to keep putting out music. This Saturday, if any of you are up in New England, I'm playing at the Aura in Portland, Maine with Spose for his Pete Ain't Christmas #6. And then on December 29th, playing with the legendary blues harmonica musician Charlie Musselwhite at the Oshman Family Jewish Community Center in Palo Alto. And then on the 31st, New Year's Eve, I'm playing First Night Monterey again. So a lot of shows coming up, a lot of interesting, different kind of shows. But let's get into it. This is my interview with Brian Mazzaferri. Check out their new album, Canon Eyes. We're going to hear a selection from it at the end. And I appreciate you guys listening. Brian, I appreciate you being on the episode. It was a great talk. I learned a lot about Magic the Gathering. All right, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, we are east of LA. I'm here in the hotel room with my man, Brian Mazzaferri from I Fight Dragons.
What up?
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Andrew.
Hey, that's cool. I like that you couldn't call me my real name.
It's I like to call you that.
You get the Andrew privilege.
Thank you. Well, I feel privileged.
When people, I don't know if this bothers you, probably not, but people come up to me at shows and stuff and say, "Oh, what's up, Andrew?" And if I don't know them, I'm always like, "Ugh." But I know it's not like private.
See, when people come up to me at shows and say, "What up, Cuddles?" If it's not you, I get angry at them.
Cuddles.
But you can call me that.
Thank you. Thanks, Cuddles. We're here at Player Omega, and it's the inaugural thing Warped Tour is doing, getting into the competitive gaming world.
Yeah.
And it's the first day, and you guys came in today, and you guys came and saw my set, which was cool. You and Chad.
It was dope. It was great to see you.
It made me happy to see you guys out there.
Oh, yeah. That's a blast. We
toured last year, and I wanted to interview you so badly for the podcast, but you'd lost your voice.
I kept losing my voice. It was actually, I think we played a week of shows, right? 8 shows. And by the last one, there were some songs where I could not hit the high notes, and Bill and Packy had to sing with me.
You couldn't, but it wasn't super obvious to the audience.
I hope not. I feel like that last show, there were some moments, but I made it through, and I didn't fully lose my voice until the end.
Oh, Baltimore.
Yeah.
Which was a great turnout.
It was a blast. I mean, it's still a lot of fun.
Then I went down and played DC by myself.
Right.
I rented a car.
I wish we could have joined, but yeah, schedules had us we had to end that a day before you.
And you guys, yeah, it's interesting that our first tour we did, 2012, we talked about this a lot. We were actually talking about earlier tonight. That was 2 whole months, right?
Yeah, we did the whole U.S. It was kind of crazy.
Oh my gosh! And it was with the band Skyfox was the second, or were they first?
Their first opener,
and then I was second.
Yep, and then us,
and then y'all. And it was after you had done Warped Tour the first summer.
Yeah, We did a Warped Tour in a van in 2012, which was its own experience, and then we went with you in the fall.
They say bands that do Warped Tour in a van typically break up. And that did not happen for you guys.
We didn't break up somehow. Although I was just talking with Chad about it today. We all have very few memories of that because of the sheer amount of sleep deprivation.
Right.
That's a tour you were supposed to do in a bus. And so lots of times there's no hotel because you just have to drive. It was a life experience that summer for sure.
Props to you guys. That's real cred. That's You did the whole tour.
Oh yeah.
And you were saving money? That was it?
Because we had just bought the van and we were trying to save money and all that fun stuff.
The Dragon Wagon. Is that what you called it?
We did.
Yeah. You guys did this epic, what was it? Like people, well, you can describe it like people who started supporting you from the beginning helped you buy your first van, right?
Yeah, well, to help do our first tour, actually, that was when our first tour was opening for MC Chris, and we also needed to fund that, and in order to cover our costs, we sold 100 lifetime memberships to the band, which was like this was back in the day, internet music industry, people just making things up. You were a piece of that, and yeah, that was one of our things that we tried was say, all right, 100 people, $100 each. We're just going to sell these, and every piece of music we release, we're going to email to you digitally for free for the rest of the band. And anytime we come to your town, we'll add you to the guest list, and you can come into our show for free.
For life.
For life, lifetime membership.
And it's still active.
Yeah, we've got every show we've played just about, somebody has said, like, oh, by the way, I'm emailing and I'm on your list. Can you put me on the list? Okay, sure. And we've still, every release, even as we did Canon Eyes, our new album, it was mostly for Patreon backers. But when we did the digital release, I emailed it to all the lifetime members as well.
So they have it.
Yeah.
And Canon Eyes, what's the official digital release date? Is the whole album out, or you've been doing singles?
No, so we've been doing singles. So the public release is December 9th.
Oh, this is good timing for this interview.
Yeah.
That's cool. And so that's your fourth full length?
Third full length. Yeah, and we had 2 EPs as well. We self-released Cool Is Just a Number in 2009. And then we did Welcome to the Breakdown in 2010 as we were still working on Kaboom. But it was taking longer than we thought. So we took a few songs that we were working on.
And that had the Back to Future cover?
Yeah, Power of Love.
Yeah.
And we did that one because we've been playing it live and we just wanted to put together.
Yeah.
And then, Kaboom was in 2012. And then that was the end of it. Or then we got off the label and self-released, or did Kickstarter for the Near Future, which was 2015. And then now Canon Eyes. 2019. So they're getting farther and farther apart.
Canon Eyes. So wait, and what was Project Atma?
Project Atma. That was we sort of named the Kickstarter because we didn't know what the album was going to be called.
That was the future.
The Near Future the album that came out of Project Atma, the Kickstarter.
Oh, cool. And what's interesting, that had Chicago on it, right?
Yeah, the album.
That album had the song Chicago, which was a song that you have a really great YouTube video talking about all the A&R's involvement in that song. And you're a very interesting artist to talk to, I love talking to you about life and everything, but your experience, because kind of like me, you straddle the old and new business models.
Sure.
And you've been on a major label and had all the high budget videos and stuff, and then done it indie and always done it in really progressive, interesting ways. And
thank you.
No, it's cool. I always admire that about you guys. And I think that song, Chicago, is a cool example. So let's talk about that song briefly.
Sure. Well, so I sort of tell some of the story in the YouTube video, I think. But during the time when we were signed to Atlantic, we were working on the new album, and I mentioned it took longer than we thought, but because part of that was, if you're on a major label, the stereotypical thing, which they tell you, and which was absolutely true for us, was the main A&R guy that was assigned to us was like, look, what we need, the only thing I care about is a no-brainer smash hit. So go write a song that when I hear the demo, I think this is a no-brainer smash hit, and we'll be good to go. So just that.
Yeah. And that's so subjective, by the way.
Oh, yeah. You might say that.
Based on what he had
everything.
for breakfast. It's that's an insanely...
It's a tall order.
It's a tall order. So that's what he was... okay.
Well, so I say that. So that was, during that time, I was writing a ton of songs, trying to write that no-brainer smash hit, and I was also doing a ton of co-writing. So it was... And that actually was... I really enjoyed that experience as a songwriter. I had never done much co-writing.
Did you have a publishing deal that...
Well, so ultimately we did, but I didn't have one going into it.
Okay.
And so there was just a ton of connections through Atlantic and different folks. They would set up writing dates for me, and other people that I knew that I admired. I got to write with Adam Schlesinger from Fountains of Wayne, which is my favorite band of all time.
And he has an EGOT, right?
Is he an EGOT?
I think he might be.
I believe it. I mean, he's a super prolific, amazingly talented guy that has worked across all those media. So I believe he could be an EGOT.
Yeah.
I have a couple of friends I know from college that have egos. They did not get a Tony yet, but I'm sure they will.
He has 3 Emmys and a Grammy. Okay. Anyways, you were able to collaborate with some like amazingly people that you revered and people who had a lot of success in the industry.
Yeah, which was a really cool experience. And I also, frankly, collaborated with people that I thought were horrible sellouts and folks that I didn't want to be working with. But that was like its own kind of amazing life experience too. And so I say that because I would fly to LA for like a week, and I would have writing dates with people. It's kind of the craziest thing because you just show up. You like go out there in the morning and you meet them and you shake hands and you just start writing a song.
Like Tinder of writing.
Yeah. I mean, so it's kind of amazing.
Would you have coffee first and get to know them, or just be like, let's go? Like,
depended on the person.
Interesting. Man.
Like, so actually, and some of them were great sessions. So actually the guy from Aqualung was a session where I just kind of showed up and he was like, hey, I was noodling on this morning. And I was like, yeah, that's great. What about this? And we just dove right in and we wrote Just Decide, which is a song that was probably one of the best liked ones off of Welcome to the Breakdown. So we've played it live a ton. It's like a definite fan favorite live. And that just kind of came out in one day. And it was we dove in. And then actually, you know what? I think his daughter came home later and we all went out for frozen yogurt. Or he called it yogurt because he's British. But some of them went like that, and it was amazing. And then there's other ones where I would show up and we would talk a lot, and we just couldn't quite find a vibe. And even one or two of them where it was like we sort of worked for half a day and was like, you know what, this isn't a good fit. We shake hands and go our separate ways. That's fine too.
And then, so in that situation, Brian, would you, if there were like a bass line or a chord progression in that song, would you have to then call them a co-writer if you took it and worked on it somewhere else? Or like,
yes.
You would?
100%.
What if you showed up to the session with the chords written though?
I mean, so if I had showed up with stuff and nothing was added and then we just took it and left, then there was no like writing there. So actually that exact thing happened. I don't even know if I mentioned this in the YouTube video, but one of the sessions where, and I'm not like bad-mouthing in any way, but that track, so maybe I'll back up for a second.
Yeah,
so
right.
The story you had asked about was around a track that affectionately became called the Wells track because it was one of the days that was like one of the most exciting. I showed up to work with a guy named Greg Wells, who's just an amazing producer, multi-instrumentalist. He's one of those folks that a lot of people may not have heard of his name, but you look up his credits and you're like, oh God, this guy's fingerprints are all over all this stuff I love. And so we didn't know each other, but we just sort of dove in and in the first day made a track that we both were super psyched about. But I only had a day of time with him and we hadn't written any, what they call top line. So no melody, lyrics.
Okay.
It was just a track. The chords, I mean, it was fully fleshed out and well recorded with like drums, guitar, because we were working in his studio. So, and he had an assistant. So not only did we like make a demo, it was like an amazing bed of music. But he was so excited about it and into it that he sent it to the A&R guy before we had actually like written any melody or lyrics. And
without your knowing?
Oh yeah. I mean, but not in a negative way, but just because he was so excited. He's like, look how great this is. And the main A&R guy was like, this is it. This is the hit. This is it, guys. All you need to do now is write melody and lyrics.
Universally relatable lyrics and catchy, pithy phrases, right?
Right. Like on this track, it's it. And it was like, on one hand, exciting because you're like, well, I think he's into this. But on the other hand, it was like, how can anything possibly match up what he thinks? You know, my wife actually referred to it as the perfect wedding dress. Oh. Apparently, this is a thing for like women, especially that have some idea of the perfect wedding dress in their mind, which actually stops them from ever picking a dress. Because every dress in real life can never measure up to the perfect wedding dress in their head.
Interesting.
They always just find something wrong with the one that they try on.
It's like the platonic ideal, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like any copy of that is going to be imperfect
because it's real.
Because it's real.
It can't be the platonic form or your idealized. Yeah, exactly.
So what was the aesthetic like thing that he loved? It was the riff, right?
It had a riff. It had so it used chiptune, and I think the chiptune and the guitars just sat together really well too, and even just like the initial mix, it had some hooky stuff. It was a great track. I love the track. I think people love the track. But so then the whole story of the YouTube video was, from there, it was like I wrote a bunch of different versions. None of them were like, catchy hit enough. But then it was like, all right, well, we're going to get some more folks. And so one of them was a version, Rivers Cuomo from Weezer did 2 versions that are kind of wacky, but like also just amazingly surreal to hear, like, Rivers Cuomo's voiceover by stuff. And Adam Schlesinger did a version that was also kind of a little bit like wacky in its tone, but also just nuts to hear. And it was really catchy, actually. I still have like the playlist with all these demos.
It's like you have a SoundCloud playlist of it, right? Or is it?
Yeah, you're right. I think so. A lot of them that I had, I put up publicly. And then, man, just all these different ones that were, and actually, so Chicago was ultimately the one that we liked the best as a band. And that was one that I had just written by myself from a melody and lyrics perspective. But yeah, it was just a crazy journey sort of through all that, because ultimately none of it was the big hit. But interestingly, I went back for another writing session, and we wrote Geeks.
Oh.
And it's funny because in my mind that was like from Kaboom. I thought like that was as singly as we were going to get.
Right.
And not only that, like it went on KTCL. JJ, our manager, got it tested out on KTCL in Denver, and it tested really well. Like it went to number 1. The numbers, like there was a couple other songs out at the time by major artists, Adele and some other folks, and it was like testing right up there with. It was super mind-blowing, but ultimately, it was one of those things where nobody at the label, they were like, guys, you're not like, you're this weirdo chiptune band we signed, we're not taking you to radio. Like eventually they even had some, because JJ, our manager at the time, was just like a very savvy guy and like pushed the issue because it was testing super well and all this stuff, and eventually they collected a bunch of like rejection notices from, essentially they had the A&R team put it together. It's like, here's the reasons that we're not taking this to radio.
The A&R told you that, or told him that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. So the reason we ended up working together is because JJ was also managing me at the time.
Yep.
And JJ had this surprise success of being kind of behind the Gautier, Somebody That I Used to Know single. And what was it? The Flowbots, Handlebars.
Yeah, I mean, that was JJ's, I feel like, initial
calling card.
Yeah, the thing that really put him on the map.
And it was like he'd work with these kind of weirdo, niche-y, I don't mean that in a disparaging way, but
no,
like
absolutely,
these non-conventional artists and find a way.
I think he would say that in a positive way.
In a positive way. And that he told me he sent a letter to the president of your company explaining he approached that single in the way that he'd approached those other 2 singles. And just because they didn't have the chutzpah to follow through. And it tested so well in Denver. And like, as an aside from a first person account, remember the Denver show, was it Bluebird? Was one of the like sold out, like, or at least, sold out. Full. It was one of the best shows of the whole tour because you'd had a radio single that
turns out
JJ had pushed and made happen.
Well, and Nerf and the program director KTCL, not to put it all on JJ, there's certainly his sort of doing to get in the door, but then we had a bunch of allies there too that especially once it showed like it was testing well, they were really championing the song too.
At the radio station. But the point is that the major label people weren't so instrumental.
Oh, right. No. The label had nothing to do.
In fact, they were not helpful because they were...
Right. Well, so this is like how it was kind of explained to me after the fact, is like in trying to take it any wider, like it's one thing to get a song on a station and get it tested out, but in trying to get any wider, it's funny when you're signed to a label, you almost have this other question. So like, think about it, if JJ is trying to do it on his own, or any manager or anybody talking to a different radio director saying like, look, this has worked really well at KTCL, here's what's going on. The program director on the other radio station is going to be like, yeah, but so I have a meeting every week with a guy from Atlantic and he's not talking about this. So like, what gives here?
So what's fishy with this story?
Right.
I'll tell the story very quickly because this could be a long thing, and I'm going to keep it brief. I know you're not really an ICP fan, right?
Not in general. I mean, I'm aware of the movement, and I'm not anti-Juggalo in any way, but I would not say that I'm a huge ICP head. No.
One of the interesting things about their history is similarly they had done a lot of stuff independently and grown a local following as you had in Chicago, and they got signed to it was Jive Records in the mid '90s, and it was big in Detroit because basically on the history of what they'd done locally, and so. What they had achieved locally. So they were like, okay, well, if we can do this in Detroit, let's see if we can do this in another city. So they blindfolded their tour manager. He threw a dart at the map, landed at Dallas. They went to Dallas and they just pushed the album so hard and sold another like 20,000 copies in Dallas. And they called the A&R and they're like, look, the reason it's not reacting is because you aren't pushing it, but we're showing that if we take the Juggalo stuff to this other city and work it like we did, it will react. And they knew at that point that like it was gonna you couldn't put all your hopes and dreams in some A&R person's hands.
Not at all.
And you can in fact prove that by like doubling down on your hard work. But the reason I tell that story is because it reminds me of that YouTube video where I could tell that you were probably like in a lot of mental anguish having to redo the song, but you also were like really determined to either prove them right or prove them wrong, or just instead of just forever being in like this suspended animation of what could be, right?
Yeah, and it's funny. So we were talking about this before we started recording. I have no animosity towards like I still view that time of my life as just an incredible life experience. Like I never just thinking about myself. I never thought I would get to have that chance of doing a lot of the things that we got to do. We probably wouldn't have been touring together or known each other as well if we hadn't done the label thing. Again, from all those writing sessions, even the ones that I didn't love or that didn't go anywhere, like I learned so much. Like those were really great experiences. And it's so I say that because there's in my head, it's not like, oh man, those jerks and like they screwed us over. Like, no, we rolled the dice and
talking about Atlantic. You don't think of it like that. That's great,
exactly. Man. It's like here's the thing. You're like when it came down to it, you're right that like we sort of did everything we could. JJ again, our manager, I think took incredible strides and got us to incredible places. Considering that he was pushing like a chiptune nerd rock band,
right?
Trying to get them at like national alternative radio. But when push came to shove and the rubber hit the road. We ultimately didn't tip. They weren't willing to go with it. And so it's like, I get that. If I'm a business person sitting, at Atlantic headquarters in New York City, like I'm gonna have a hard time putting my backing on Hi-Fi Dragons. Like, especially at that time, that was a weird time in the music industry too, where like everyone was still pretty petrified. It was pre-Spotify. It was before the major labels had kind of figured out this whole digital thing. And there was a lot of like, I don't know, the phrase, nobody got fired for buying IBM. It's kind of a businessy phrase, but like see what you mean. You get the idea. Like back in the day, if you were trying to be a niche tech vendor or something like that, like it was really hard because IBM was the standard, and like people, it was not. Might not have been ahead of the curve. You might not have the latest tech, but like you're not going to get fired if you hire IBM for a project, even if the project ends up blowing up and being a complete failure. You're not going to get fired because you did the smart thing and hired IBM.
Okay,
so it's like funny. It's the safe choice.
So the equivalent being you programmed the safe like Green Day single or something.
Exactly. That's what you pushed to radio,
right? No, they're Warner. So I think what's a big Atlantic?
So Atlantic is owned by Warner, or was. I don't really follow it much anymore. So let's see, Atlantic at the time there was
Tori Amos. It's not really the same genre.
I don't know. Bruno Mars was breaking
Great
at the
example.
time too.
Yeah.
And there's some, but the better example for the IBM parallel might be some like older or somebody who was a well-established act that you're trying to take their new single to radio. Stone Temple Pilots, I think, was there, and they were like, we're going to try and push the new Stone Temple Pilots song over the new Hi-Fi Dragon song. Like that's the choice, right? Somebody's not going to stick their neck out, or it would take somebody inside that organization sticking their neck out to say, we're going to take a big risk on these guys. And that just, at least at the time, like that wasn't happening a lot. It wasn't just us, but like, there's kind of all sorts of elements that go into that for sure.
Well, you were the chiptune band that got the deal because it was kind of an underground thing and people were aware, but the first rock band to implement that to get like a mainstream record deal, right?
Yeah, I'd say, but also we were such a funny like black sheep of the chiptune world anyway, because we're a band and not like, I mean, I feel like a lot of the chiptune world is straight electronic. Like, no, they don't want the guitars and rock. Like, I mean, the closest you get in that world is Anamanaguchi, which is basically like still very dominant chiptune. That's like the centerpiece, and then you've got guitars and drums, and their music is great. But it's like still mostly instrumental. It's like very much still the vibe of the chiptune world. Whereas we try and do some fusion of like it's rock and it's chiptune and it's all this stuff, and it's like nerdish, but the subject matter is not as nerdy as most nerd culture acts. So
you write pop songs,
kind of,
yeah,
for better or worse.
Because you, Brian, it's interesting that like your influences are like Fountains of Wayne,
yep,
and like stuff with when you would DJ when we were in the band, you play stuff with like very catchy, enjoyable melodies.
That's definitely my favorite stuff.
And that I think is why I Fight Dragons music is so great. And I always get your song stuck in my head is because you come from that place where it's Lin-Manuel Miranda talks about why he loves Weird Al. And it's because the clothes of genre are what the songs wear. And so the parodies and his originals are like really effective because they're great songs that wear the genre of the clothes in a clever way. And that's kind of how we approached Hamilton, right?
Sure.
The clothes of the historical period. So the clothes of nerd rock or chiptune or whatever you want to call it over these pop songs is a unique thing that you guys were doing. And I think it's been emulated since, but was like kind of like timeless, but also very topical at the time. And
thank you.
Yeah, no, and I think that's was exciting. And it's still exciting about you guys, but I can also see how then that becomes a hard thing to get to top 40 radio necessarily, right?
Definitely, it's yes,
but not impossible because yeah,
it might have been a tough hill to climb for sure.
Did you feel like, Brian, during all this, and we never really talked about this, but that you were carrying the responsibilities of, after you'd made the record, the responsibilities of it being a success, your band guys, your openers, your management, all this stuff was on your shoulders, like Atlas, or whatever.
Like Atlas, if you got completely squished by the globe, yeah.
It was your baby, but also like I remember the feeling of like, man, this Brian's. Yeah, I was an opener on that tour, and you took very good care of me. But I was like, I know this is not easy. I don't know. I'm not trying to answer your own question, but like, what was that like?
Yeah,
then?
no, I mean, we were talking a little bit about this.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the 2012 tour we did, right?
Yeah. So let's talk about chronology. So Kaboom came out 2010 or 2011.
The end of 2011.
And then 2012 you did Warped Tour.
Yep.
And then you did that 2-month headline.
Fall. Yeah, that was our first headlining tour.
So you were out a lot that year.
Yeah.
To really
4 months plus.
And meanwhile, things with the label were like not super fresh, or
no. So we had just gotten off actually. So we were still on the label when we did Warped Tour, but then right after we got officially off, and that was why the tour that we were on was called the War of Cyborg Liberation Tour.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, that was like the poster with
But one of the coolest things I remember that you guys did, and JJ, I guess, was part of this, was getting the Nintendo 3DS and the geeks will inherit the earth.
Yeah, it was Save World Get Girl.
Save World Get Girl. Was 3D video.
Yes, I still have a Nintendo 3DS that I've disconnected from all internet,
right? So
that I can still have our 3D video on it from when Nintendo Video had that 3D. Yeah, that was a crazy experience too. So that was one of those things that like we never would have gotten to do. And you're right, it was definitely a lot of JJ setting that up, but we never would have gotten to like be a part of that if we weren't on the label, because that was Nintendo working with Atlantic to say, who are some acts of yours that we want to do 3D videos for Nintendo Video. So it was like, Bruno Mars and a bunch of big popular acts that Atlantic had, and us.
Right.
And but it was nuts. We got to fly out to LA for a day and do like a crazy elaborate shoot on a like B-movie sci-fi
And there's
set.
like aliens, right?
Yep. Oh,
and
yeah.
guns. And
it was casts. Yeah, there was a couple like alien women dressed like were having green makeup, and like another dude who played like an alien in a bunch of things, and then Packy was in full werewolf makeup. Like it felt like a real like movie set for a day where everyone just got together and
it's fun.
Oh, it was insane. It was so fun.
If you were to ballpark the budget, what do you think it
was? $100,000.
Jeez.
Yep. No ballpark. That was the budget.
$100,000, crazy. And that was wow. And that was then on that was on the that was part of the tab to recoup, right?
That's actually a fair question. No, so that's not because that was a Nintendo project. That was not like the label paying for a music video. No, they never would have paid for us to do $100,000 music video. So, but because it was part of a program that was actually marketing for the 3DS, like this was Nintendo Video, so it was actually came from Nintendo dollars,
and
not
that would,
from the
would
label
you say
dollars.
That's your biggest budget video?
Oh, by a factor of 20.
That's cool, man.
And I think, every other music video we've done, and we haven't even done that many, we've like spent $3,000 or $5,000 max.
Yeah, and do you think that? Imagine now if like Nintendo were paying for a Rock Band to do a 3D video for the Switch or something. That just seems like a very much of that time.
It's right, because that's what I'm saying. Like at that moment in the music industry, people were I mean the larger companies were kind of freaking out, and nobody had really figured out digital yet. Like
right.
iTunes was happening. Everyone was like buying 99-cent singles on iTunes, and that scared the crap out of everyone, because from a label perspective, you were like, man, we used to make great margins on these albums. Now everyone's just going and buying the single for 99 cents, but we're still spending the same amount of money to push that single at radio. It used to be you push that single at radio, people go buy
the whole album.
$20 CD, you just keep jacking up the price. Now you push that single at radio, people buy a 99-cent download. They thought the sky was falling. Of course, fast forward, and Spotify and a lot of other things have happened that, YouTube, even music in different ways, lots of platforms have started to monetize, and I think it's a different. I'm not that close to it anymore, frankly, but I get the sense that it's a very different ball game than it was at that time.
Well, but then going back to the original story we're talking about, therefore your A&R persons has this intense infatuation with the fantasy that this one demo could then generate $1 million and get 1 million downloads because it's so great that like, they have to.
The no-brainer smash hit song.
The smash hit needs to happen. Who cares about the rest of the record because it's about the singles, right? And so therefore, yeah, it's like it's a lot of pressure, and it's also a lot of
yeah. So I mean, going back to your point, so yeah, setting the stage for that. So it was a ton of pressure. Like actually, so while I grew a lot from that experience as a writer, because I'm the songwriter for the band. So yeah, I did definitely feel like it was on my shoulders whether or not we were going to succeed as a band, because I needed to go write that hit song. And then especially once things didn't happen with Geeks at Radio and we got our way off the label, it was, and then that doing our first headlining tour in that fall, it was tough. Like it's a funny thing to say, because the way I put it is, as a band, we've gotten farther than I ever could have conceived. Like it kind of is nuts to me that we can roll up to any given city in America and 50 or 100 people will come and pay to see us play music. Like that's insane to me. But it's also funny because there's 5 people in the band, so it's a different story than you or other people we know who are solo acts, where it's like, not only is there a bunch of gear we have to bring, but there's just 5 humans. And so at that time, especially, we had been doing it full time for a couple of years. And it was just a really tough reality check to be like, look, 50 people showing up is not going to pay for 5 people's livings, especially given the fact that we've got to bring all our gear and have a van and all this stuff. Like we're not really even making money at that point. And again, this is funny because it's all pre-Spotify and a lot of like monetization things that could happen down the road. It was a tough tour in a lot of ways.
So you had no tour support from the label?
No, we were off the label. Yeah, man. And so actually, but they, again, talking about good and bad, they helped us pay for that. We owned a van. They had helped pay for it to begin with. So it's not like,
oh, that's good.
It's not like they didn't do anything for us. So we had that van.
You didn't have to like return like for the wheels or something.
Right? No.
And then and I remember you guys were very like generous to me, which I wanted to go on record. I appreciate that because you guys, you were generous to me. You were kind to me. I was like, I know sometimes I'm a little on tour back then, especially.
You're a little wonderful.
No, there was like some.
You're a lot wonderful.
Thanks, Brian. We joke about like the stories and like a lot of memories from that tour. We really became close.
Memories. We had, I feel like, some of our highest highs and lowest lows. We don't have to publicly name any stops on that tour, but both we
Vernal,
had some,
Utah.
Wow, you went and called it out.
No, I remember you guys went out and I took the bed and I was like, okay, whoever comes back, we stay at this house. We're talking about this. I just want to go on record. And I was like, okay, I told the people we're staying with, okay, whoever gets back, they share the bed with me. And like, we're trying to make room on the floor or whatever. But I passed out. But the room that I was in, the door was closed. So y'all had to stay in the living room on the floor and the couch. And I always felt like, I wish that, well, it was selfish. Yeah, like, I wish that it had been more like share the love. Because you guys were the headliners and you guys deserve to be comfortable. So I just want to say that's not how you're supposed to act,
Can I tell you
Lars.
something?
What?
I never held it against you.
Really?
No.
Oh.
I was glad you got a night's sleep.
Thanks, Brian. Really?
But so there was also some like really amazing shows. It's funny because we had such a blast. I mean, we ended at the Metro in Chicago, which actually I think that whole show is on YouTube still for like streaming.
Yeah.
And we had some great shows. I mean, any kind of crazy places from, I remember Portland. We were just talking about this with Chad earlier, but like Portland, Oregon, places that we've honestly not maybe even played since then, but were just great stops on that.
You haven't played
tour.
Portland since then?
No, so we haven't toured very much in the last few years at all.
San Francisco was good.
San Francisco, you had Slims. We had a great time.
Because you do like some Midwest or like we did the East Coast last year.
Yeah, it's funny just geographically where we live in Chicago. It's a lot easier for us to like drive out to New York and back essentially,
right?
And stop at a couple places along the way in
right.
like Cleveland and Boston. Well, Boston's not on the way, but you know what I mean. Like do a little loop and East Coast down to like DC. Yeah. That like takes us a week. Whereas if we try to go to the West Coast, it's just a lot harder to get out. It's a big country, and you think Chicago's in the middle, but it's not.
No, you're central.
It's
but
like
not
a
really
third.
central.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the middle, but it's actually like much closer to go to the east.
But so how far is Detroit from Chicago? 4 hours?
Pretty close, 4-hour drive.
And then you get to Detroit, you're on Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah, you get to Indiana, you're on Eastern Time.
Yeah.
Chicago's like at the edge of that time zone.
Yeah, so it's not easy for you. So for you guys, to do the West Coast, you have to have more time available. And you now have been very successful at your day job. I don't know how much you want to get into it, but like,
I mean, I'm talking about it. It's
cool.
No big deal.
You started after that tour. You were like, all right, well, let me figure out some other income streams, basically, right?
Yeah, sort of without one of the downsides of, so when you sign a label deal, and we were just talking about this, like you lock up your intellectual property, and you hope that ultimately you're trading that for some bigger success for what'll come. But if it doesn't pan out, they still own it. So like we don't really get royalties on Welcome to the Breakdown, Cool as Just a Number, or Kaboom. We got physical rights, so we can still press copies and sell them online at our shows. But all the Spotify revenue, which is likely pretty significant, Crazies and Geeks each have a couple million plays. We don't see any of that. So it's an interesting spot we were in, which was we, from the revenues on 2012, could tell that we really couldn't do it sustainably and as a touring band, at least like full time anymore. And yet we didn't have control of our intellectual property up to that point.
But can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Were something that get like 100 million views you could potentially recoup, right? And then start getting royalties.
I mean, if by some, fluke of the universe, somehow Crazies ends up like, who even knows? Yes. But if
the new Star Wars movie.
Yeah, there you go. They're like, we need this nerd rock song from 10 years ago.
Right. It could happen.
It could happen.
Maybe Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I don't know.
I'm into it.
Yeah.
Chris Pratt, if you're watching this, you really gotta, or listening to this. I don't know why he's watching a podcast. But yeah, if in that world, the reality is there's all sorts of creative accounting in that world too. Like if something outlandish happened to the point that it really should recoup, we could probably put our foot down. But in reality, it was just one of those things. So anyway, yeah,
creative accounting. That's a euphemistic way of saying like this version of Excel cost us $100,000, something like that, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Finding more expenses and chargebacks and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I had to figure out if we couldn't do Hi-Fi Dragons full time, what was I going to do? And then, bada bing, bada boom, I ended up as a pre-sales engineer working in Salesforce.
And so that's interesting because I remember when I was talking about that, you said there were some similarities in the skill set that you'd kind of learned on the road and ordering merch and design and all that stuff, right? That were like it wasn't an alien.
Well, so yes and no. I've had the weirdest sort of career, quote unquote, in a lot of ways. So after that 2012 tour, I had to get a job of some kind, and I was just looking on Craigslist, and I found a listing for a comic book printing company that happened to be literally the office was across the street from my house. And I was like, well, this seems great.
Comic book printing across the street. That's crazy.
Yes.
Yeah.
In Evanston, Illinois, like north suburb of Chicago. Okay. Yeah. So I went in. I mean, it was just like a generic account management job. But they were just looking for people that were interested that kind of wanted to learn about comic books, and they helped grow his international small kind of printing startup. And so I joined, and that was actually what had a ton of overlap because it was working in like a startup-y type environment, even though I didn't really have any formal business background. I have an arts degree and a philosophy degree. But from having like run a band and just tried to start it up and guerrilla marketing especially, there was a ton of overlap. So I ended up working there for like 3+ years. And actually in that time, we grew the printing business into like a $3-4 million business, and like a lot through expanding into comic book printing and custom game printing. So I took like the stuff that I learned on Kickstarter and helped like other people doing Kickstarters like print their games and print their comic books. And also while I was there, I got to conceive of and launch a business for Magic the Gathering card carrying accessories.
And you love Magic the Gathering.
Called Pirate Lab. I do love Magic. It was like, because we had done for Hi-Fi Dragons, we had done a theme song for Duels of the Planeswalkers 2014, which was Magic the Gathering video game. And when we were on tour, we got to stop in to Wizards of the Coast and do a draft. And it was like, I mean, that's a blast. Awesome.
And were they on Warped Tour 2012?
Oh, and then so Warped 2014, actually it just turned out that a bunch of folks like Ryan from Yellow Card and some other folks that I knew were all just kind of also getting into Magic the Gathering. And it was like really cool. So we would, after the set, we would just get around outside of like Yellow Card's bus or somewhere else, and just a bunch of us would sit around doing Magic the Gathering drafts.
That's what's up. So Warp 2014, you would have played Portland.
Oh yeah, you're probably right.
But not a club show.
Right. Yeah.
So you were doing that for a few years. And so, but things opportunities would come up with Hi-Fi Dragons that you then like had to balance the two, right?
Well, my boss, so I was working at that point at the comic book printing company, and I'd actually gotten promoted and was taking a larger role there. And I told my boss, like, so they've asked us to go on Warped Tour. Is it okay if I work remotely for 2 months?
Oh, wow.
And he was like, okay, as long as I can come with you. So
really?
For 1 week of Warped Tour 2014, I brought my boss in the bus with us, and he rode. It was amazing. He had a blast. We had so much fun.
Oh, what a great boss.
Incredible.
Shout out to that guy, man. That's awesome.
Absolutely. So, hey, for all of your comic book printing needs, go to printninja.com. And for all of your Magic the Gathering carrying case needs, go to piratelab.com. Because even though I no longer work there, I still love those companies and those people. And I hope, they're great companies and do right by people. So.
It's interesting, Brian. I wonder if when you started working with them, maybe they didn't say this, but obviously they're aware of your success with your previous band, right?
Was
that on your resume?
The only thing on my resume. He said the comments actually that boss at the time, his comment to me was, "I've never had to verify a candidate on YouTube before." It's like, well,
but like being like, this is knowing what you had to do to reach the success that you achieved. It's interesting how pursuing your passion and doing the non-conventional, unorthodox things sometimes can lead to like surprising success. And through all this, we're talking about this. We have a mutual friend in the TV world who became aware of you, and you did a theme song for his
Goldberg.
show. Yeah, Adam Goldberg.
Yeah.
And that you never would have thought that you'd then have this successful TV jingle.
Not at all. Like, it still kind of blows my mind.
But people don't like people in TV don't necessarily start out playing club shows with their chiptune rock bands, right? Like composers, like
I don't think that's the plan A for a lot of them. No,
you've had a very surprising career where I always loved hearing what you and I still do because I think you look at the world differently. You find success on your own terms, and you're not compromising with your music. Like you make sure you put out the best stuff possible. And I love that about you, man. I just want to say that.
That's appreciated. Have you heard of the book Range?
No, please tell me about it.
Oh my God! So I'm a pretty big reader. Like I read. We talk about this on that tour last fall. So the two genres of books I essentially read nonstop. One is fantasy. So I'm always reading a fantasy book at any given time. But the other is
Range. Who's it by?
David Epstein.
So Range by David Epstein.
The book is Range by David Epstein. So anyway, at any given time, I'm reading a fantasy book and some sort of like psychology or self improvement type of book, like something that helps me learn something and just get better at something.
What was your 2 degrees in real quick? I
have a musical theater performance degree and a BA in philosophy.
That's dope. So that's kind of similar. I mean, the musical theater is kind of like fantasy and yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's not related.
There was no plan.
You're a Renaissance man, Brian.
No plan. So I say that anyway. So the book Range is this is a book that resonated with me and just kind of blew my mind as I was reading it because it was like spelling out the way I think about life, and it's all about. The subtitle is something like how generalists triumph in a specialized world. And it's all about the different perspectives and connections that people bring who are working across domains and across fields and are not necessarily just following kind of plan A throughout the entirety of their life.
Right.
And so that was like, yes, my thinking about it helped me justify the like sort of ridiculous smorgasbord of things that I've done in life and career.
At what point then? So what year were you saying you discovered this book? Range?
Oh, it just came out this year.
Oh,
but it was something that made me think. It helped me like recontextualize my last 10 years of life.
Right, and how like you found success in ways that other musicians maybe didn't see. Like opportunities, right?
Maybe. I mean, a lot of it's hard because I also like I've gotten to work with great people. I've had a lot of luck. Like, and yeah, by all means, I feel like I'll give myself credit for being persistent and working hard. But like, it's also going to be there's always an element of chance and luck and randomness that goes into this stuff. And I think I always try to work really hard to hone my craft and to make sure that when those opportunities arose that I could capitalize on them. Yeah,
luck is opportunity meets preparation. And you've been prepared and found the opportunities. And another interesting thing is this story you told me. I remember we played the show in Jersey and we like last year we drove through Harlem because you were dropping me off in Brooklyn because you guys were staying in Brooklyn too.
Yep.
And we drive past like one of your old neighborhoods or
could be.
And
we mean when I was living in Harlem?
Yeah. Were you living up there?
Yeah, in Central Harlem. Right after college. I lived there for like 3 months.
Because you said you were a soldier at FAO Schwartz, right?
I was a toy soldier at FAO Schwartz. Yep. I'm in a lot of people's family photos.
Doing musical theater stuff.
Sort of. I mean, I never really, so I studied musical theater.
Yeah.
And actually a lot of my friends from college are all musical theater folks. My best friend is a musical theater actor and actually has also worked with Adam Schlesinger in totally different capacities.
That's awesome.
But he's also a writer and has had like a Broadway show and stuff like that.
What's this show?
So it was called Glory Days.
Okay.
It only ran for one night, but he's had a lot of other writing success. And he's also been a Broadway actor and all this stuff. So he's actually kind of a Renaissance man as well. A big inspiration to me. Best man at my wedding.
What's his name?
Nick Blameyer.
Okay.
Have I ever introduced you guys? How have I not?
No, I think
you should talk to him for this podcast.
I should, man.
You guys would get along.
He was at our Brooklyn show.
Yeah.
And I talked to him for me. He was real nice, real
He's
cool.
a very nice guy and a very cool guy.
Okay.
Actually,
yeah, I would love to talk to him.
So he and his wife are both fascinating people. Like they're just amazing artists and great people that are also have a, like kind of Renaissance careers in their own way, where they're like writer, performer, smart people.
And I love this podcast medium because we're allowed to do tangents. But one thing I wanted to say, like you're talking about range, right?
Yeah.
And something cool that I love about musicians and songwriters, our job when we're in the studio in the lab writing songs is finding harmony and narrative from the chaotic, stressful, like chaos of life, right?
Yeah.
And so range, it's funny because it's a metaphor for like the range of your skills, but also like your melodic range.
Sure.
And like there's a lot of metaphors that come from like the skills, Jedi skills, I'm using air quotes, from music that like you can apply in other things in life.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And I think that's
like,
important to like
composition. I mean, performance too. So that's, you talk about, it's funny, but now my actual job is that I'm a pre-sales engineer for Salesforce for a software company, and my background as a performer comes in handy all the time. Like I'm in a job where yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's being a pre-sales engineer is like one half tech geek and one half performer, like storyteller. It's what it is. And it's just really interesting because that's a part that is hard. It's a role that's hard to hire for, partially because you don't get that many tech geeks that are also performers. But again, it's the fact that I've had such a weird career and different opportunities, I feel like have definitely made me well suited for it.
Tech geek, storyteller, performer, and then also the fact that like you are able to storyteller, you're able to know the beginning, middle, and end of like any sort of like this podcast will have a beginning, middle, and like
Which part are we at?
I think we're maybe middle.
The creamy middle.
We're probably 2/3 in.
The dizzying highs. Okay.
Yeah. No. And so yeah, that's interesting, Brian. It's very interesting. I love listening to your albums because it's. I was talking to Ben Garby about this. Remember you came to his apartment? We did the Jedi video.
Our Jedi video. Oh yeah.
And I said, Ben, I sometimes feel like when I tour with Brian, I talk to him too much about his music because I'm like authentically a fan of his stuff. And I wonder if I bother him sometimes. And Ben goes, well, how much do you talk about it? I'd be like, well, I'll ask him about lyrics. I'll ask him about concepts. And he'd be like, sounds like you're not too annoying, but you may want to dial it back, Lars. just so don't be too much of a fanboy. And I think is what I love about each of your albums is they're thematic, right? They're like small musical theater pieces.
A little bit. Some of it, especially the near future, like actually had essentially a song cycle for half of it. Yeah.
It's a story of, let's talk about the story of that album.
Sure.
I wanted to get into that.
Oh, okay.
So first of all, for someone who hasn't heard that record, how would you explain the story and and it's like the second side B, right?
It's actually, yeah, I mean, it's a record, so you could start with anyone first. But it's the side A, technically. It's the first half of the record is one continuous song cycle.
Yeah.
So I was at the time, I was getting into a lot of kind of prog rock and older like concept albums that were very much like designed around this idea of a side of vinyl or, one record. And then some of them are longer too, that you get like Lamb Lies Down on Broadway and like ones that are actually super sprawling. But specifically, I was thinking about Rush 2112 and the way that is able to tell a story across one side of vinyl. And I wanted to think about what Hi-Fi Dragons could do in that format, like not trying to ape 2112 at all, but just thinking about this idea of take 20 minutes, like limit yourself to a side of vinyl and try and tell a story, and at the same time also it came with this idea of combining it with a graphic novel. So it's when you get it, it's only available in vinyl. There's no CD version. So that even if you're listening to the digital version, you've got the fold out
which
booklet.
I have a copy.
There you go.
And it's streaming though too.
Yes,
but you never did CDs.
Right.
Oh, interesting.
Because it's got to come with a booklet.
Right.
Because it's got a graphic novel that like has some instrumental passages where you read the words. But yeah, it's a story that's like kind of loosely structured on a hero's journey framework about a 18-year-old boy who, it's funny when I like talk about it, it sounds really basic, but then when you tell it in the musical form, it's more complex because everything has different pieces. But essentially, it's like an 18-year-old boy who ends up having some crazy adventures with beings from another dimension that come there, and ends up saving a girl's life and getting magical powers and fighting some conspiracy theorist, maybe other dimensional evil beings in his town. All that fun stuff.
Well, I mean, that's funny because that is, in a way, in a macro level, that's 2112. The guitar, the evil beings of the communism,
right?
The based on like
yes, it's less objectivist than 2112
right.
at its core, but a little more just general humanist, I guess. Well, liberal humanism versus objectivism, but philosophically, I understand where you're drawing that parallel.
Yeah, I guess that's like any sort of hero's journey, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Are you an Ayn Rand fan?
I've read The Fountainhead. I feel like I had a moment when I was 18 that I would have called myself an objectivist for a month or two, but that's about as far as it goes.
Let's explain that word.
Oh, objectivism.
Yeah.
So that's the philosophy of, is it Ayn Rand or
I don't know. No, I've heard
AYN.
it both. AYN.
Ayn Rand, and it's essentially the philosophy of selfishness and the argument that sort of enlightened selfishness is the ideal form of human kind of religion or whatever. Enlightened selfishness. I think there's like some more specific terms for it that I'm butchering, but her concept is if everyone's looking out for their own self-interest in an individualistic way, that will be better for the whole, as opposed to, she came out of Russia at a time when, it was the worst parts of collectivism and, quote unquote communism, but actually just like fascism and repression and all those types of things. So that philosophy, I think, is in a lot of ways a reaction to the idea that everyone's supposed to be conformist and work for the greater good, and the ways that kind of creates perverse outcomes. So in that sense, I get it. It's the idea is everyone should, everyone should look out for themselves, but also in reality, that's a tough road to walk. And also, if you read actual things about Ayn Rand's life, she's an interesting character as well.
Well, because isn't Anthem? I had a 7th grade teacher who actually had on his podcast, Mr. Salerno. He got me into Rush, and he told me that 2112 was kind of based and inspired by Anthem, right? And so instead of a harp or something, he finds a guitar.
Yep.
And then famously in Ready Player One, the book, that's a big part of the plot.
Yep.
And so 2112 is like this very far-reaching prog rock opera that I wonder if now people would say it's a problematic story, or to use her as cite as a reference, or can art be timeless? And
I think it can be timeless, because here's the other thing. I don't think it's as strident in some ways as Ayn Rand material can sometimes get. And I think musically it's also just wonderful. Like Neil Peart may be, a staunch objectivist. That's fine. But I don't think the 2112 itself is like a blatant, like you have to be very into Ayn Rand to get it. Like, no, I think that level is there. But also, to your point, it's a basic kind of hero's journey as well, where he finds the guitar and it changes. It sort of is the thing that helps. And actually, it's a bit of a tragic ending in some ways. But because I think he dies, right, or ends up killing himself. But it's interestingly, if you're not reading along with the notes, you can listen to the whole thing and kind of not get that too.
and I think in a way, and I say this in a positive way, it took me a minute to realize that the first half of that record was one story.
Really?
When it was like, I was like, oh, Brian's going through some interesting stuff. Brian's telling some different stories. And I was like, oh, it's
the first half of our record. Yeah.
Your record. Because it took me a minute to realize that was, and then that the rest were like, Chicago's on that record, right? Like,
yeah, and then the back half of the record is just songs
that aren't really related, other than they're about your life.
Yes.
So do you see yourself in the character in the first half?
Oh, yeah. Like, it's so, I would say it's written from, this is like a funny thing to say and to admit, but I mentioned that like half of what I read at any given time is fantasy books.
Right.
And I've read those books since I was young. Yeah. There were books that, even before 3rd grade, second grade. Basically, as soon as I started reading, I was reading young adult fantasy. And I would say for an embarrassingly long time, like well into high school, I was convinced that at some point the adventure would begin. Like a portal would open up and I would be going to another dimension, like embarrassingly long time to really think it's in some part of my soul that was going to be my life. Because that was like the trope from all the fantasy books that I'd read. Like everything's normal until one day.
Yeah.
And so I say that because I've grown up and I no longer expect that, nor would I go through that portal because I've got a family and a lot of reasons to stick around.
Right.
But it's interesting because that was certainly the jumping off point for me, was thinking about like some of the just alienation and some of the depression is a loaded word because I would not have called myself a depressed person or depressive, and that's got a lot of folks that are struggling with that have have implications I don't want to take on. I'm like butchering this at all, but I'm trying to be sensitive to the fact that I'm not claiming to have had clinical depression, but I certainly was someone who is introverted and struggled a lot with anxieties, social anxieties especially, still do. But growing up, that was something that I think really influenced my outlook and part of the reason I would retreat into fantasy books. And so when I think about, especially starting out with that song 18 and where it goes from there, that is absolutely based in not like true stories of my life, but thoughts and feelings of where I've been at different points in my life.
What are the lyrics to the chorus of the 18?
Everybody knows what I should do. Everybody works, so I should too. How can I explain what feels so wrong? Living with the shame of feeling you don't belong. I'm kind of meandering around it here, but so you try and smile and hope that you won't always be alone with your dreams, living in between 18.
Great lyrics.
Thanks.
I always thought, Brian, when I first heard that, I read that or heard it I remember where I was. My parents have we have like a family vacation house up in Tahoe. Sometimes I'll go up there and like catch up with my friends' music and have time alone. And I remember I was playing Smash Brothers, listening to your record on repeat. And that first song, I was like, this is Brian's. I hypothesized this is Brian's relationship to the music industry. This is him saying goodbye to everything that, like we talked about earlier, Atlas, like the weight. You were throwing that off you and like going back to your adolescence and rebranding yourself. And rebranding is definitely not the right word. Recreating yourself as a person who does his music because he loves it, and it's just part of his identity. Well, is that a correct reading?
100%. So yes, because cool. here's the other piece of it that you're talking about the that process of doing all the co-writing and trying to write the big hit song. I learned a lot, but I also absolutely lost my own voice. Because after a while, I didn't like anything I wrote anymore. So actually, a bunch of songs on Kaboom, even ones that I love, are all co-writes with Matt Mahaffey, who produced Kaboom.
Of Self, right?
Yeah. Matt Mahaffey, Self.
And that's his solo project?
Yeah. I mean, well, it's had band members at various times too, but it's pretty much him.
Yeah.
And he's amazing, and collaborating with him was amazing. But it got to the point where the only songs I even liked were ones I wrote with him. Right. Like I couldn't even write something by myself and enjoy it anymore. And that was just a horrible place to be in artistically. And so I wrote The Near Future and those 4 core songs and the motifs and stuff in the course of like 3 days. And part of it was exactly what you said, like just how do I throw off all of my own expectations or all of the voice in my head that's still saying, is it a no-brainer smash hit? Because if it's not, it's worthless. Wow. And so it was like, well, what if I write a 20-minute, rock opera concept thing that has no pretension at even trying to be a no-brainer smash hit. It's just something that I want to say.
A very non-conventional way of writing a 20-minute song. It's funny, man, because when Rush did 2112 in the documentary, I remember seeing that like they were having issues with their label, and it was their way of saying like this is our artistic statement of our independence. They were still signed to, ironically or coincidentally, Atlantic, the same label, that like they were trying to manifest their own like agency in the world too.
Sure.
So it's interesting that was an inspiration. So then what's the metaphor of the interstellar beings? They're aliens or?
Never explained directly.
Okay.
Interdimensional beings, certainly. They come from a different reality.
And that's you maybe embracing the unknown of what, or just that's
you're going deep here, man.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's
maybe that part isn't so like.
It wasn't trying to be a direct allegory in that way. If I'm just being real with you.
Oh no, it's because I know why. Because we did the Star Wars song together, and there's aliens in that. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So that was more, that was just like, where's the story gonna go? This idea of like, right, that.
Well, so I will say the piece of it that is, again, sort of hero's journey from a skeleton perspective is starting off with that core feeling of feeling like you're in between and you don't have a place, looking for something to be a part of or looking for that meaning and not being able to find it. And then actually it's through the kind of fight and the struggle that he gets from saving the girl and her grandfather that ultimately leads to the last part, which is fighting on. And it's just a very different tone. And that's sort of the idea, is finding that sort of inner, I mean, we're getting a bit literal here, but finding that like inner voice or the meaning that is the thing that you're fighting for and it keeps pushing you. And that's sort of the ultimate journey there is, it doesn't necessarily have to be interdimensional beings or aliens, but it could be.
Okay. I was reading that into it. Yeah. That's interesting, man. Well, you've probably never gotten as deep about that story on a podcast before, huh?
That's 100% true.
So I'm honored I have got an exclusive from the man. You have a record coming out, a new record, and let's talk about that album.
Sure.
You funded it in a non-conventional way, right?
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier, but so we did the weirdest Patreon in the world,
right?
Because we're totally using the platform wrong.
Or right. Or, maybe we're all using it wrong.
Right. Yeah. Maybe everybody else, including the creators, are all using it incorrectly. Right, because Patreon is generally a format for people making recurring work. So webcomics folks and YouTube video makers and even musicians that are releasing singles or things on a regular basis. So we decided to do a Patreon where we would post things on a regular basis, like every week, but we wouldn't actually do a paid release until the album was done. So we in our 2+ years of Patreon, we've done one paid post.
And so people would sign up and they'd commit that when you released it in one post, they get charged for it.
Yes.
And so
although it's not really even a commitment because they could leave at any time or join at any time.
And then if they join now, they can access it without having to have paid for it.
That's true.
But we don't need to talk about that.
It's fine. That's the thing. Like we were sort of doing it the wrong way, but to your point about the freedom, like it's been an amazing experience, and I regret nothing about the way we've done it.
You're a person who's, you're talking about range, right? You're experimenting with new ways of doing things. Because remember, you were one of in the first wave of bands to do Kickstarter after having left a major label, and that was phenomenally successul, right?
Yeah, that was way more. I mean, that was what we did to fund the near future, and it was way beyond what we thought we would raise. And then we went on to squander a lot of it we made the record twice. Band almost broke up. It was its own funny journey there, which I didn't realize
you made that record twice.
Yeah,
because you were. Well, how come?
Oh God! So we went. I was very ambitious with the way that I thought we were going to make it, and we started working with a producer that was not a great fit, and he was pushing us in directions that weren't great. But at the time, I was like, okay, let's do it. And then it ultimately came to a head that the band did not like where it was going, and I had to agree. And so, but we had already spent a ton of time with this guy, and we're basically down to there was no way to not pay him for the record.
So did you have enough money then to redo it?
We redid it.
Yeah. So are you saying
we made it work?
There's a lost I Fight Dragons record or a different version?
No, it was a different version. Yeah.
Interesting. Would you think you'll ever see light day or
No,
not?
no.
Oh, interesting.
It was not. I mean, it was directionally not as good. So it was. I don't even know. He wasn't the right fit for what we wanted to do. I think it was no fault. He's an amazing producer.
Right.
But the big change was after that we went and like really approached it more as a band and took a lot of sessions where we were working on it musically, like from the ground up. And I think that's, if you listen to the near future, there's just a ton, especially the first half, there's a ton of like musical nuggets and just like Easter eggs and all this stuff that we like spent so much time putting together as a band.
And shout out to Bill, because like he's really, with the Will Post stuff, done some amazing stuff.
Yeah, Bill wasn't on that record. Bill did leave the band for that record.
Oh, shout out to Bill, even though he's on that record. He's not. I didn't realize that.
No, yeah, he's not.
So you played all the keys.
I did all the chiptune programming, yeah.
That's interesting wow. Well, shout out to Bill anyway.
I would agree. We love Bill. Bill came back and has made Canon Eyes. It wasn't like, it was no sort of animosity. He just really, to your point, wanted to do some more solo stuff and felt he needed to kind of put his full energy towards that. So he did.
I guess I was listening and I wasn't reading the liner notes and the credits in depth. That's interesting, man.
You're thinking like, oh, Bill did this and that.
Yeah, I did. I thought that, honestly, because I knew that he wasn't touring with you guys, but I didn't realize he wasn't writing with you guys.
Yeah, no. So he actually, interestingly, was a part of that first version of the record.
Wow.
But then after we hit the reset button, he moved to LA and his head was on his solo stuff, and he didn't work on it with us.
And he does these really ornate, interesting tributes to like Radiohead and.
Oh yeah, man. His album Pantheon is just an incredible listen.
Yeah.
He's actually got a new album out this year as well, which is just wonderful.
I should do an episode with him.
You
Just
should.
about his solo stuff.
I agree.
We've had some fun memories together, and I think he's also a very spiritual person.
Oh yeah,
you two are like, he's like Harrison, and I think you're more like maybe McCartney. I don't know.
I'll take it.
I don't know.
And
Maybe
Keith Lennon.
Yeah, Packy
if
too.
We're just calling ourselves the Beatles here.
Packy's very influenced by the '60s rock.
Oh yeah,
and so that's like, so you have, and then you have.
I love his solo stuff too. You should have him on the podcast.
Yeah, he's got great songs. Yeah, I should do an interview with him too, and Hari, who's doing stand up.
I was gonna say Hari's solo stuff is comedy.
Yeah, and speaking of Rush, going back to Rush, your drummer Chad loves Rush.
Oh yeah, he's the one that got me into Rush to begin with.
Really?
Yeah.
Remember that's all we talk about on that tour, 2012. Brian, so your new record, talking about Patreon, do you want to talk about some of the themes real quick? Do you mind?
Yeah. So a lot of the new record.
And remind me the title?
Yeah, called Canon Eyes.
That's what I thought. Canon Eyes.
Canon Eyes.
Spelled
it's a play
like,
on words. Canon, CANONEYES.
2 words?
2 words. Canon
Eyes. That's
but
interesting.
Canon spelled like canon, not like canon.
Like Kaboom.
No. That would be CANNON.
Like canon, like a song.
Yeah, or like religious doctrine.
Or like the books,
like part of the
English
canon.
major studies.
Yep.
Canon Eyes. But if you canonize someone, isn't it spelled, you're saying, wait, isn't canonize CANONIZE?
It is.
So
that would be the religious piece.
But
if you're like making someone a saint.
Or if you're, and when you like have to study books, you study the canon of Shakespeare, right?
Yep, that's the canon it is.
So why eyes like vision? Because you're looking.
So thematically, a lot of the record is about sort of that longer view and legacy. And I had a daughter. She's 3.5 years old now. But that was when I was writing a lot of these songs, was when she was first born, and I was really inspired for the first time in a while to write more. I had a period of time where I was just writing a ton, and a lot of the songs were about fatherhood or family, or just sort of taking a different perspective. I don't know. It really changed, especially the way I looked at songwriting, because so many of my lyrical things, even talking about the near future and things like that, is a very introspective, self-centered in some ways view. And I don't necessarily mean that in a negative way. It's just there's a lot of self-centered, self-focused anxiety in the themes from a lot of that material. And Canon Eyes still has some of that, because that's just, I think, always going to be in my my vocabulary. But there's a lot more of it that's also focused on either not specifically fatherhood, but again about this idea of a broader view and legacy and what you're sort of leaving behind, and thinking about things in that way, how you take a different view on life and on the people around you.
So like a different perspective, the eyes. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. So what about, that's interesting, Brian, because you hear artists talk about when you have a kid that it's harder to find time to create.
This is true.
But it sounds like you had this influx of inspiration from fatherhood.
Yeah, for sure. From a writing perspective. That said, actually making this album has been, my daughter's 3.5 years old and the album is finally coming out. So
but I would argue that the writing, everything else is just talking about genre, is the clothes that the songs wear. Writing is the hard part, and writing is the thing that really takes those special milestones in your life to manifest great work. Right? Don't you think so?
I'd agree. I'd say that it's hard to just write the way that you could sit down and produce, like record something. Let's lay it down. Let's do this or that. But like writing has to come from somewhere.
It's the different hemispheres in the brain, if you look at that old perspective. So that's cool. So you wrote, so how many songs did you write in that versus how many did you end up using?
20 plus, I think, wrote that were in consideration for the album. And actually that was part of the fun of the Patreon process, is for the first time we actually released almost every piece of the works in progress. So as I had those acoustic demos, and when I write, it usually starts with a like iPhone recording of me and an acoustic guitar. And I had about 20 of those, maybe a little bit more. And we would then work those up as a band into, we call it like a band scratch. So it's all of us just kind of playing in a room, Bill's on keyboards mostly, not chiptune at that point. And throughout the process, once a week, we would release some work in progress. So it started with a lot of the acoustic demos. And there was some of those iPhone recordings of us, the band in a room playing. And then as we laid down some more scratch tracks and built up the tracks, we would just release it as we went. But yeah, we ended up getting down to 12.
12. And so it's like the fans are there with you in the studio as it comes to life.
That was the idea.
That's cool, man. But they only have access if they've committed to pay, but they're not being charged for them, right?
That is the trick.
That's cool.
You could stay the whole thing, and we told people well in advance we're about to do our paid post,
and you could be out.
You could be like, peace.
See you, Spotify.
Yep.
Yeah. And then you're doing a thing where you're releasing them on the back end. On Spotify and on the streaming services by single, right?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So we're very much in a singles based world, but we are very much an album band,
right?
For better or worse. That's kind of how we like to make music and consume. Most of us like to consume music that way too, in the band. But so that was one of the great things about the Patreon is like, look, once the album was digitally finished, mastered, and ready to go, we released it to everyone on the Patreon. But then from there, we set it up so that we're releasing one song every 2 weeks leading up to the last few songs are all being released on December 9th. And that's specifically around Spotify because of the way that their algorithms work and also your ability to submit to playlists and things like that. So we're on that kind of 2-week cadence right now. And it's been awesome. Like people get to have new music on their release radar from us every 2 weeks.
So you think, so every week is too much?
So yes, and also even just purely from the submitting for playlists on Spotify. So 1 week is a minimum, and they say you should give it like 2 weeks.
So what's your digital distributor? TuneCore?
DistroKid.
And does DistroKid submit to those things?
No, but we actually use TuneCore for the near future, but because of TuneCore's model is really tough if you want to do that singles thing.
Yeah.
But DistroKid, because it's all you can eat.
Right.
We could release them all as singles and then release the album, and it's not going to be a really expensive proposition the way it might be with TuneCore.
So wait, explain the pitching to playlists and stuff.
So that's all actually on Spotify. That's not through your distributor.
So you don't have to email and annoy people. It just happens automatically.
Through your Spotify artists account, you can submit your next release as long as it's uploaded with a release date of 2 weeks or more in the future. I think it's even 1 week minimum.
You do it yourself, dude.
Yeah, and you write your submission and you give them a bunch of genre.
What's the submission, right?
So it's mostly actually analytical around saying like what instruments are on, what genre, what moods. So they're kind of like going that way. And then there's like you write, I don't know, a few hundred words at the end about your song, what it's about, why they should listen. And then it goes into a like big queue at Spotify of editorial listeners.
That's so
that
dope.
review all the stuff, and then some of it bubbles up to be on playlists. Actually, one of our singles just this last week got on the all new rock playlist on Spotify.
What's up? Congrats, man.
Thank
you. So for people, I know a lot of content creators listen to this podcast. So you submit it. It shows up on your artist profile on Spotify saying that you submit December 1st, December 14th, new I Fight Dragons singles coming.
Yep.
So you have to do this back end stuff
on your Spotify artist profile.
And so it's going through, and maybe you do it on December 1st, probably earlier is better, right? And then there's 2 weeks for it to like go through this vetting process. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so crazy. I didn't realize this, man.
It's nuts.
People want to charge you hella money to do this for you and do it badly. I'm saying that.
I believe you.
I'm not saying that that's just the business. We're spreading the knowledge, the wisdom.
Yes, our mutual colleague and acquaintance in general, all around force for good in the music industry, JJ Italiano, I think also had a hand in helping shape that system and fighting for that vision at Spotify as well of independent creators making a living
and advocating for themselves and explaining why and how this can engage people on the platform through like a well curated, enjoyable like context that they consume music through.
Yeah, I mean, for example, you talk about Bill. Will Post, his solo project, had a song that was submitted through this system, and just on the merits of the song alone, not anything from label pushing or promotion dollars or anything, it got added to a super popular, what they call an algotorial playlist. So it's editorial, but there's an algorithm behind it too. And it's now gotten a couple million plays.
Ooh, that's like $6,000 right there. Like 1 million plays is 3,000, I think.
Okay.
That's what it breaks down to.
I believe it.
Not to count Will's pockets. But that's awesome.
But it's just on the merits of it being an amazing song. It got added to this playlist. Some editor listened to it through that submission process and liked it. And now it's still been on the playlist for months and months, and he's got a lot of listeners from it.
So can you do it for re-releases, or probably helps if it's new?
It's all got to be new.
So this is what I like about DistroKid. Just real quick, and then we'll talk about the next steps in your life, and we'll wrap this up. DistroKid's cool because I did a song with my friend Chris Eyre, who's a singer-songwriter, and we took a Bon Jovi song and we did interpolation. You Give Love a Bad Name, and I did this song when I was doing my Robot Kills record, but I never released it, and we made it Nerds Give Nerdcore a Rad Name.
Right.
And he sounds like Bon Jovi, and it's awesome. But back in the day, you had to clear that with label and the songwriter and the publishing company. And the times I did do that, it would cost thousands of dollars.
Oh, yeah.
And I do it, though, and I recoup it in most cases. But now with DistroKid, if you submit it as a cover or an interpolation, they do all that for you. And so Bon Jovi's publishers want to recoup those dimes. So DistroKid will send them the money from that song, and they make it so you can do like interesting covers and mashups and.
I didn't even realize that. That's
songs
amazing.
You're not sampling the actual track.
Right? Yeah.
So shout out to DistroKid.
Because you get mechanical, because you pay them mechanicals for the cover. Obviously, clearing a sample would be a different story.
Yeah, right. Because you have to involve the label.
Right.
And I think that's really cool. And then we just did a cover of Butterfly by Crazy Town with this a cappella group. Came out kind of tight. I haven't
heard that. I gotta hear that.
It's 20 years old now this month. So we did it, and it was like, I guess you could do covers on YouTube, but DistroKid is really nice with those things like that. So I learned something new, Brian, and I really appreciate you teaching me that.
Oh, I learn something new every time I talk to you, Andrew.
That's what's up. Thanks, G. I think this podcast wins an award for not only being one of the longer ones, which is good. We've used a lot of big words.
Oh, excellent.
Because you're a very well-read, educated guy.
As are you.
Thank you. And I think it's like cool to be able to, man, I feel like when I talk to you, I'm trying to keep up with you.
We're using SAT words. It's good.
SAT.
I've been accused of that.
And
Sunday words.
This has been good. Do you have any questions for me as we wind down?
Always.
All right. Well, that's what's up.
I don't know. It's from let me ask you this. What's been your favorite part of doing this podcast?
I love that I get to like purposefully, intentionally sit down with people that I love and care about for like an hour or two, catch up with them. It forces me to have conversations with them and to meet people. But more than meeting people, like I love that I made connections with like people I'm a fan of, such as like the the Roger Rabbit dude and like other musicians and stuff. It's more fun being able to like do inside baseball with my friends.
Yeah.
And I know that people like don't, I mean, I know my download numbers and I don't know if people listen to the entire things, but I think that's the beauty of the long form media.
As a consumer, I love it. And it's funny because I've even been thinking as we were talking, like, man, there's kind of a lot of inside baseball here, but I was literally thinking of that phrase,
right.
like, is this too inside baseball? But because it's long form, and I, as a listener, that's the stuff I like too, especially if it's something that I'm into. I'd much rather hear a long form deep dive than the like 8-minute snippet on a big, you know what I mean? Because when people do, for whatever reason, Amanda Palmer popped into my head, and because she's very well known and she does press when she does her album. She does it very like traditionally. She does a ton of like press tours. But then I heard her interviewed on the Tim Ferriss show, and it's interesting because as a podcast, I don't listen to a ton of it, but the ones that I really enjoyed are those long form conversational deep dives, because you get stuff that is not just the like radio snippet. Like it is the inside baseball, but that's what I enjoy. I don't know.
No, and that's all. In the last third of my podcast is always doing this is always the most fun. Like if you ask what I like, it's always that, because my format is always like, this is my last question. Okay. And that's when my guests, like when I ask that, guests are like, okay, and they kind of open up, and then you can keep doing this is my last question. This is my last question. Because then you get thrown at this like like it's a battle of attrition that they are open.
That's a good word.
Yeah. That's not like a war, but it's also like
battle of attrition. I was going to say it's a very violent way to think about that. Oh, just one more.
You're able. Yeah. I think.
Okay.
Okay, Lars, whatever you want. Okay. Yes, Atlantic was rough. Yes, that tour was long. No, but I enjoy being able to. I always wanted to write a book about all my stories in the independent music game.
Sure.
And this has become the audiobook of that, and manifested that dream in an exciting way.
Sure.
Because it's better than me just talking. It's me telling the stories of my experience with my friends, and then learning they're like part of this memoir, because it's important,
Yeah.
And
I don't know anyone with as many great friends and friendships as you. And I think that's like one of your superpowers is you are able to cultivate and maintain great relationships with people. And I've felt privileged to be on the receiving end of that. Like, just at times you'll email me about something, or even just drop a DVD or a book in the mail to me. Like, that's just amazing. Like you're such a great friend in that way. And it's, I don't know, it's inspiring to be a part of that network and to be on the podcast as well.
Thanks, Brian. Well, that's sweet. And I think our friendship's special, and it'll always be special. And I cherish the times we get to play together. Like, shout out to Player Omega for bringing us together.
Yeah.
And last thing I want to say is, I love that you give me a new perspective on things. For example, I mean, that's been the whole theme of this 2 hours. But the anime stuff you put me onto in 2012 really was inspiring, and I really love all like Princess Mononoke,
the Studio Ghibli stuff,
yes,
Miyazaki movies,
Spirited Away, and all that stuff. I always appreciate that you got me into it, because I feel like I have more of fluency in that world now.
That makes me happy. It's my jam. I've been starting my kids very young on that stuff. Spirited Away, I started my daughter when she was like 2, but she's very into it. She wants to watch Chihiro, and she at this point she's Spirited Away, My Neighbor Totoro, and Kiki's Delivery Service are three of hers that are in regular rotation.
Was Spirited Away scary for her?
Yes.
Yeah.
But she was into it. It was great.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
You're a good dad, Brian.
Well, we'll see.
Cool. So check out Canon Eyes, the new I Fight Dragons record, what's the street date?
Street date. Hit the street, December 9th.
Social media.
Yeah.
Brian Mazzaferri on Twitter.
So I don't really personally do social media anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
You just make music. Imagine that.
I know. So I try and maintain I Fight Dragon social media poorly, I might add. I'm not very good at it. So while I may have technically social media presences, definitely I Fight Dragons are the place to follow, and I promise nothing.
I Fight Dragons on Twitter.
Yeah, so at I Fight Dragons on Twitter. I think iFi Dragons Rock on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I think / iFi Dragons on Facebook. Those are the main 3 where stuff goes up.
You are like a king of in the art game that you make. This is like an anomaly, dude. It's like finding water on Mars. It's like, or Mars has water, right? Or did
it?
Did it? I don't know.
Who carved all those canals, Andrew? That's what I want to know.
They were the guys who visited that 18-year-old kid in his your story. No.
Well, according to the Edgar Rice Burroughs John Carter of Mars book series,
there were people on Mars.
There are people on Mars.
Oh, there are.
Yeah.
They're just chilling underground.
Deja Thoris, you got all kinds of folks. No, they're there, just being Martians. Big green people.
They're still there.
Yeah.
So you don't waste your time on social media. You spend your time in the studio and then working a side hustle that allows you to be a family man and have a comfortable life. That's what's up.
I'll throw another book at you. Digital Minimalism.
Okay, writing this down.
Yeah. Cal Newport. I've been into that lately. And it's just sort of the concept is trying to eliminate optional technologies from your life. So and then really calibrating yourself to what the costs and benefits of various pieces of specifically like mobile technology, like a lot of the stuff that's really become threaded into our life in the past 5 or 10 years.
Threaded in, yeah, right.
Social media is the biggest example, but like mobile news sites and things that are training us in very specific ways that are part of the attention economy. So ways in which our brain is being fragmented and monetized by large corporations.
Sure, and that's why we have, in a large part, the political situation we have.
One could argue.
Yeah, I mean, I think this rise of neo-fascism is... That's another podcast.
Oh.
Brian, so a more joyful question.
Yes.
Digital minimalism, I'll check that out.
You should.
Well, I was watching Nerf Herder set, and I was like, oh, I should be posting all their hits. I'm like, I'm just going to watch Nerf Herder. I did one video towards the end because it was like funny, but like, it's so much more fun just to not be like, I want to swear, messing with your freaking mother freaking phone.
Yeah.
Because I remember a time, 2012, I don't know. I always go back to this like a glory year, but like the whole, it's been bad. Most of it's bad. Social media is bad. We're all scared. We're all panicking. We're all frustrated. Artists are like sweating their numbers. And here's Brian over here putting an album out non-conventionally on Patreon with his band, killing it, making songs he loves, and being a fully realized human. What?
Thank you.
Here's my last question.
What a compliment.
No, it's what's up. What's your most valuable Magic the Gathering card?
Now or ever? Because I actually have sold all my cards. I don't own any physical Magic the Gathering cards. Well, that's not true. My father-in-law bought me 2 Magic the Gathering cards. I have a Chuck Norris card and I have a Donald Trump Planeswalker card.
It's like a political parody.
Yeah, they're parody cards.
Does it? But can you actually use them?
I mean, not in any legal format.
Right.
I'm not going to throw that in my modern deck.
With your sardonic homies.
Right. But so probably the most valuable one I've ever owned was...
Dark Lotus?
Black Lotus? No. I've seen one back in the day. My friend did have one.
That's the most valuable one?
Yeah, that's like 5 figures. But I did own...
Ooh, like low 5 figures or high?
I have not kept track of it.
Still, that's high.
It's plenty for a piece of cardboard. But
Black Lotus, by the way, is this... we'll go back to that. Dark Lotus is the card. Black Lotus is ICP's side project with Twisted, who is their former label mates. We don't need to get into that right now. So that's why I said Black Lotus instead of Dark Lotus.
Wait, you switched it again.
Dark Lotus is the card. Black Lotus is also the name of MC Frontalot's bass player, who's named after the Magic the Gathering card, which is why I would... He's Black Lotus, and I always would be telling him these facts about ICP's side projects. And by the way, Tales from the Lotus Pod is a really great album by Black Lotus. Dark Lotus. Oh my God. I'm sorry, Brian.
It's all right. So, okay. But to answer your question, when I did sell all my cards, I had an Underground Sea 3rd edition that was like a few $100s.
Underground Sea?
Yeah. It can
like the water?
It can tap for black or blue mana without any penalties when it enters the battlefield. Very powerful in vintage and legacy formats.
Real quick, how do you play Magic the Gathering? So you have for real. Let's do real quick. You have land that you have untapped power.
So you are a planeswalker.
Okay.
Hey,
How quick can we go? Because we could
right.
probably do this.
you want the 30-second version?
No, let's do the 5-minute
it.
version.
Okay.
We're at an hour and 40 minutes.
People were really listening to the end so that they could
now they're
learn
done.
to play Magic the Gathering. So you face off. You are two planeswalkers with spell books, as
Okay.
it were. It's your deck of cards.
You're a mage,
You're mage. Well, you're planeswalkers. That's specifically the thing you are, because you're casting these spells.
but by definition, I won't interrupt you
Is
anymore.
a planeswalker a type of mage?
Yeah.
I'll leave that to the locutionists to decide.
Okay.
All right, the lexicographers. There we go. That's the dictionary people, right? Anyway, we're a little slap happy at this point. So we're two planeswalkers facing off. We have our spell book, which is our deck of cards.
Okay.
And you're right. We take turns putting down land, which by putting down those different types of land, it gives us sources of mana, which is spell power. So then based on tapping those lands, we can, once per turn, generate this mana, which is the spell power. And then based on the number of lands we've tapped,
Yep.
we have different numbers and colors of mana, spell power, to cast other spells from our hands. So those could be creature spells that we summon.
You explain that so well. I'm still
You're with
you.
it?
Every
Awesome.
word.
We got creature spells we can summon who are like part of our army. They're going to fight. We've got spells we can cast that are like doing damage, so they can directly, you can like attack your opponent with a fireball. You throw it at them. You can attack their creatures that they've summoned to try and kill them.
So is Black Lotus a creature?
Black Lotus is actually so powerful because it is an artifact. So you got these creatures. It's essentially a spell that gives you extra mana.
And is it related to tarot in any way?
Not at all.
Okay. But it's the idea of these magical cards that, tarot's more predictive.
Yeah, tarot is definitely its own totally different thing.
But do you think
they
like,
are cards?
in the South, like Christian preachers are like, you can't be playing that Magic the Gathering and Harry Potter. It's just witchcraft.
Yes.
Like Dungeons and Dragons had that.
Exactly. But that arguably made it more popular. Anyway, so in Magic, you get those lands, you're a planeswalker, you cast those spells, and through casting those spells and attacking your opponent with creatures, you're trying to get their life total down from 20 to 0 before they get yours down from 20 to 0. And that's it.
So it's got a role playing element.
Yeah, a little bit.
Are there die or no?
So there are, but mostly just subject to the cards. Like sometimes a card will have you use a counter and things like that, but you're not really rolling dice like Dungeons and Dragons. No.
What's the physics of the counter?
Nothing. It's just to remember. Like sometimes you'll get dice where you're like, oh, this creature got extra power because you cast a spell to make it more powerful. So you put some like dice on it for a counter.
Okay, so
To
I
say
get
that,
it.
remember that there's 2 extra power on it.
And so it's really fun.
I enjoy it very much. Yes, it's definitely my addictive game where times when I find myself with a little spare time, I will pull out my laptop and play it online.
And then you guys had a song in the online version that was like unlockable or something?
Yeah, we did a song for the end credits of Duels of the Planeswalkers 2014.
Planeswalkers, Duels of the Planeswalkers, which is a very literal
Yep. It's what the game
explanation
is.
of the game.
But it was an Xbox version of the game back in 2014. And we did a song. They had us commissioned us to do a song for the credits called Hero.
Your song's called Hero.
Yeah.
Is that on Spotify?
It's not. It's on YouTube, I think.
That's what's up. So the title is, if I'm explaining, I'm going to spit back why I think it's called Magic the Gathering.
Okay.
So
Or Hassel the Dorkening, as
Frontalot.
Frontalot would say.
Yeah. You have that's a deep nerdcore reference you just dropped.
Thank you.
So you
I
have,
played Hassel the Dorkening once.
what's the next line?
I'm out of lines there.
So you have this land, and you have to manifest the power of this land in ways that tap into artifacts, beasts, natural formations, in ways that are able to gather the magic from the land to defeat the mage, but that's maybe not the right term. Planeswalker, but he or she is using magic, so they become a mage because they're able to manifest the magic and gather it. Isn't mage in Final Fantasy?
Mage is like it's a term like wizard. So like, yes, they're both in Final Fantasy.
The Planeswalkers aren't wizards?
In a manner of speaking, they're casting spells. But sometimes the creatures are wizards too. And let me just trip you up even further. Wait, you're falling down. As a planeswalker,
right?
You can cast a spell that summons another planeswalker, and that's a card.
So it's like in Smash Brothers when you get the second creature that you want to hit the thing, so he's on your team.
It's exactly like that.
How long do they play with you? Like how long do you have your second planeswalker on your team?
Until they die.
So you can be firing. So can you have like both team with 4 planeswalkers?
You could.
Does that ever happen?
In some formats, I guess it could, because there's different formats too. Like I actually mostly play what's called limited. So where you like literally we're just passing around some packs here and cracking them open and building decks.
Oh,
so
cool.
like you're just kind of making it up on the fly, and it's a lot of fun. But folks that really are serious about it play constructed, where you like spend a ton of time acquiring cards and building the perfect deck.
Right.
And so you can get really crazy with the types of things, because you can have 4 of each type of card in your deck.
Right.
So you could end up with a crazy ton of planeswalkers or something like that.
But then when you like beat someone, you take their cards with you home?
No, that was actually in the very original version of the game. That was a rule. It was called ante. Like, so we're facing off and we're supposed to each have a deck, and you put the top card of your deck and then you're playing for it. Like whoever wins the game is supposed to take the other person's card. Oh. But no, that was not a very popular.
Why not?
Because the cards are expensive, and like
sure.
you don't like, especially if you're playing casually, you could flip a card that cost you that is worth like
Black
$20.
Lotus.
Yeah,
Black Lotus.
And that's then somebody else flips a generic like island or a plain land that's worth nothing, and you're just like, I quit. But just like take it back.
An experienced man wouldn't bring a Black Lotus to a Gen 1 Magic the Gathering game. What is that format called?
Oh, Legacy or Vintage?
The first realm where you're talking about you can... I'm just using random words. That first version of the game where you gamble for the card.
Oh, ante.
You wouldn't... A veteran Magic the Gathering player wouldn't let his planeswalker bring a black...
He is the planeswalker.
Wouldn't bring a Black Lotus to
a gunfight.
To an ante version of the game. Did I say that right?
More or less. I would agree with you.
Yeah.
No one played ante anyway. That was one of those rules that was like, it was technically in the rule book, but I don't know anybody that did it.
So let's say we're in the hotel right now, and here's the vision. For you guys to get a picture, Brian and I are sitting on the couch and on the chair in the corner of their suite. These mics are on a glass table, so we have our cards out. Everyone knows how Magic the Gathering looks. If they don't,
everyone knows.
Maybe they don't. It looks kind of like solitaire, but not. That's bad.
It looks nothing like solitaire.
Well, you have the cards out.
In that they're cards. It looks nothing like. It's like tarot. It looks closer to tarot than to solitaire.
That's why I said.
But it looks nothing like tarot.
Okay, so you have the cards out, and at the end of the game, you take your cards home with you. It's not like you're flipping cards at each other.
Right.
How do you know whose cards are whose? There's no mingling of the cards.
So not really, and a lot of times you'll put card sleeves on, so people have like their
Blue
own
and
sleeves,
red.
or the back of them has like artwork and stuff, and so
nerdy. That's legit though, right? That's legit. So you have, and you're probably your more expensive cards, the sleeves.
That way they don't get damaged.
Yeah.
Well, no, the sleeves all have to be identical because the backs of the cards have to look the same, so you don't know what your opponent's holding.
Right, that's fair. So you know how like with Smash Brothers and like the amiibos, when you put that on the thing, it gives you extra powers? Like remember on the Wii U? Do you remember if you have like do you know what I'm talking about?
I do not.
Okay, so if you have, I don't know if this is the same with the Switch. Maybe it is. If you have, and a lot of like our gamer fans who are listening made this far are going to be tweeting me all angry about this. You have like,
I'm going to admit the last Smash Brothers I played is 64. Like,
wow,
that's my jam. That's when I go back, I own a 64, but that's currently the latest game system I own.
Well, the Switch one is awesome.
I've heard amazing.
And
I'm very tempted. If I didn't have a kid,
do you have a Switch?
No, that's the thing. I would like buy a Switch, but I have no time to play at all right now with 2 little kids.
I play on the plane the whole flight out here. I play. Nice. But so I was thinking about this, and then we'll actually be done with this interview. So you have
last question.
Yeah. So you have like you remember like back in the day those gumball machines? You remember like those little homies, those characters? There's like, do you remember those? The homies. So. They were like, it was like characters from the hood, and it's like toys of them. I don't know why I used that as an example. Like just like a 1-inch Mickey Mouse toy, but it's Kirby. And so if you're playing as Kirby, you put it on a part on your controller, and it gives you extra powers that you can like physically use this toy to help.
Oh yeah,
it's like augmented. You know what I'm talking. You've seen
I do
those.
those. I know those.
Okay, so Where the heck are you going with this, Lars? Let me tell you. The kids who have the cheddar and the skrill and the money are going to collect all their favorite Smash Bro amiibos. Yep. So let's say you have $1 million and your whole deck is black lotuses. Let's say you have a very nice, expensive deck. Aren't you just going to dominate every Magic gathering of the gathering of the Juggalos?
Great choice of words. The gathering of the
Magic gathering.
The Magic.
Do you know I did the gathering of Juggalos?
No way, you played the gathering?
Yeah, we played last summer, 2 summers ago.
How was that?
Well, I'm alive. No, I went with Mega Ran.
That's fun.
We played it at 3 a.m. We're supposed to play it at 1. And we went on right before ICP. They have a side project with the 3-6 Mafia guys.
No way.
It's called the Mafia 6. And they went on after us while the sun was rising. And it was a spiritual experience.
That's awesome.
And that was another kind of gathering. It was magic in another way.
It was magic. But to answer your question.
And Black Lotus didn't appear because Twisted and ICP are fighting. Neither did Dark Lotus.
But to answer your question, yeah, that's part of why Magic is a super expensive hobby.
Right.
Like, especially if you're going to play the older formats like Vintage or Legacy, and you have to have the cards to play. Well, so on one hand, you are limited. You can only have 4 cards of a certain, the same card per deck, so you could only ever have 4 black lotuses.
It's lotuses, right?
Lotuses, yeah. 4 black lotuses in a deck. But
2 dark...
dark Muthu. You can only have a certain number of cards, but that said, it can be very expensive to play those formats because you have to have or be able to borrow incredibly expensive pieces of cardboard to have a competitive deck. But like the folks that play at the pro level, even especially Standard is like the most widely played format. It basically consists of the latest couple of sets that are out. But those cards, because it's the most widely played format, the ones that are popular for very popular decks in the current metagame, it can be thousands of dollars to have like a competitive Standard deck. And it's no joke.
That's why when you play on the laptop, it's just, are you subscribing or is it free?
So it's still money, but I mostly play limited. So that's what I was saying. Like I buy into a draft. Essentially, like I could pay $5 or $10 and then virtually crack a bunch of packs and build a deck. And so I'm not having to spend thousands of dollars to build a competitive deck.
So cracking a pack is opening a new deck.
It's some lingo in the Magic the Gathering world. You call cracking a pack. You crack a pack. It's like kind of cracking noise. Yeah.
Boom, and then you might crack a pack, and the Lotus might be black.
That's whack.
No, but then you got 50 G's in the sack, the dub sack, no, or whatever. And
it's investment, and you get it back.
You should do an album that's rap. Hey, okay. I Fight Dragons.
Actually, one of the podcasts that especially when I'm in phases of being very into Magic, there's a long form Magic the Gathering podcast called Limited Resources, and the first thing they do on every episode is crack a pack
and talk about what's in it.
Yep.
What? The packs must have different value.
Oh yeah.
Isn't there something like what year did Magic the Gathering start?
25 plus years ago at this point. It was a long time ago.
So I remember in middle school, the singer of my first band, this kid Sean Levin, who was an amazing guy. Did it
go to 11?
No, at Levin, Levin.
Yeah, but
no, he would go to 11, but he didn't play, but his voice went to 11.
His voice went to 11.
Yeah, and that's pretty good. So Sean Levin, that's funny. If he hears this, he'll think that's funny. Sean would bring Magic the Gathering and we'd play, but there was a thing where like in 7th grade, so I'm a few years older than you, but 7th grade would have been 96 for me. Anyway, what's my point? My point is that they'd get in a fight over the game and like they'd beat each other up and be racing each other and like we'd steal each other's cards and kids, we would just kind of like, or they would be rambunctious bullies. So guess what? Magic the Gathering was banned at our school.
No.
So that would have been 96 and it was like all the rage then. But so does that help? It's 25 years old. Does that make sense? The chronology?
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
So it was fresh.
Oh yeah, it was pretty new at the time.
So is a vintage?
Because when I was playing, which was a kid, which was around that time, yeah, it was like 3rd edition, and you could still get alpha and beta packs, even though they were already really expensive at the time.
Okay, and so they were, but it's like so when you crack a pack, that might devalue like a mint condition 1996 era Magic?
Pack? It depends, because depends what's in it. There's actually like whole YouTube channels devoted to how valuable packs are and whether to crack them or not. So once I had a box of a set that had a really valuable Planeswalker in it, and the box itself, I sold it for $700 because it might have had a really valuable Planeswalker in it.
And how much are the Planeswalkers worth?
Well, I forget. There was like a specific Jace or a specific like Planeswalker that was really in a format breaking deck at the time. So like it's just crazy.
Why did you think he might have been in there?
Because he was in that set, and the set wasn't being printed anymore. It was like an older box from a couple of years ago that I just had stashed away.
What was the percentage chance that he was in there? 100?
I mean, so a box is like 30. I think it's 30 boosters, which is like 15 cards each. So yeah, there was a decent chance that there would have been one of him in there.
I used to really. Oh god!
One more question.
Yeah, I used to love to collect Simpsons Kid Robots because there was the chase figures. Like there was the Hans Moleman, which was like 1 out of 200 boxes.
Nice.
There was the zombie ones. I spent a lot on those.
Oh yeah,
and a lot, man. I'm talking like a few G's.
Wow.
Dumb, and maybe 3 G's. And then to get all the stuff, and
right.
I was gambling to try to get the right ones. When I proposed to my wife, I bought the engagement ring and I sold all my like collector stuff to pay for it. Guess how much I made off of my 3G investment, and it wasn't a net positive.
2 G's?
$700.
Oh.
So sometimes it's all good. It was fine, but my point is that maybe some people spend a lot of Magic the Gathering, and like, who decides the value? eBay. Clubs?
It's a market. It's an open market. It's perfect capitalism.
Has it peaked?
That's a good question. It continues to grow. And actually, like, do you remember Bitcoin, when Bitcoin was blowing up a couple years ago?
Uh-huh.
I think this was when it was a couple years ago and not the one before that. There was...
It was like 20,000 a coin.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember if this was happening during that time frame or the earlier time frame. Do you remember one of the big things was Mt. Gox, MTGOX?
I missed this.
This was like a Bitcoin exchange that they like lost all the money.
Right.
But it's funny because that website had started as a Magic the Gathering, MTGOX, Magic the Gathering online exchange. And they ended up in Bitcoin. And it's like, because the thing is, it's big business, man. Like the companies that buy and sell this stuff, it's like, it's a really popular collectibles market with...
Still.
Very much so. And
more than Simpsons Kid Robot.
Much more than
Which
Simpsons
peaked.
Kid Robot, which peaked.
In like 2013, I have the receipts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not privy to the player numbers of Magic as far as like how it's been going, but I do know that, especially a few years ago when I was more heavily into it, like it was bigger than ever.
Right. And
now I'm a little more cash, but... And
it was interesting how on Warp Tour, it was like, like officially sponsoring the tour. And it was kind of tight that y'all were out there and you have this genuine love for it.
Yeah, it was great.
That's what's up.
Bunch of folks you would not have expected to just come back with us and sling spells.
That's what's up.
And then a bunch of people would walk by and be like, what are you guys doing?
Nerds. Kevin once said he felt like Punk died the year everyone was playing Harry Potter Quidditch backstage. But that's kind of tight. You could say nerd culture and punk aren't exclusive.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing about that year, so Warped Tour 2014, we'd done it in a van in 2012, so we didn't get to hang out much. We were just like driving all the time and, being not sleeping. But in 2014, we split a bus with another band, and so we got to hang out. And it was just funny because so what I did all the time was play Magic the Gathering, and then there was another group of people that would play Ultimate Werewolf. There was a guy that would facilitate, and we would have like games of 20 or 30 people playing Ultimate Werewolf, and it was the nerdiest stuff, but it was awesome.
Yeah, it is.
It was funny. So like Chad, who was a drummer in our band, was like,
shout out to Chad.
Yep, shout out to Chad. Was blown away that like who am not like the most social guy in the band at all, tend to be like pretty introverted in general, but he's like thought it was hilarious that I was like making the most friends on Warped Tour by playing Magic the Gathering and Ultimate Werewolf.
You're just too cool for school. Brian, who has the most valuable Magic the Gathering collection in the world?
Probably one of the stores, like, I don't know, Channel Fireball, or there's a bunch of like big stores that it's hard to call it a collection, but I'm sure their inventory is worth, hundreds of thousands.
It's insured
Beats
for
me,
a lot.
yeah. I don't know.
Interesting.
Hopefully, if they're smart.
Interesting. And so, all right. Well, I learned a lot about Magic the Gathering. See, because like sometimes I feel embarrassed to ask these questions, and I don't know anyone who loves as much as you do, other than Black Lotus.
Dark Lotus?
Oh no, wait. Dark Lotus is ICP.
Yeah. Black
Lotus is Brandon Patton, and he loves Magic.
Nice.
One time, Drew Carson, who is now Jennifer Carson, who was worked with Band Happy on Warped Tour, she, back then when he tried to teach me it one night, and I could not get it. I couldn't get it.
It's hard to pick up like fast.
I was so distracted, and she was not enjoying that I was so distracted.
It's
and I felt bad. I just couldn't follow.
You have to commit to actually wanting to pick it up for sure.
It's like a 2-hour podcast with your boy MC Lars.
This has been fun. I mean, we've spent the past like half hour just talking about Magic the Gathering.
That's what I'm saying. That's my point.
People are probably like falling off much earlier.
25% is always the best, and I feel like
this is the best.
No,
this is the goal?
It's always no. It's not the best. It's always like the surprising part. I think the best part of it was that I know you in life. Okay, goodbye. Hey. Oh, let's end with. Is there a song from Canon Eyes you want to play? Like
sure.
What's the song you want to play and talk about? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No. It's why don't we do The Places You'll Go. Kind of fits a lot of the things we're talking about. Cool. I wrote this one about my daughter and just when she was especially a baby, the like things that go through your head when you're just looking at this little like helpless creature that is dependent on you for everything, but yet you have all these hopes and dreams that for them, but they're not your hopes and dreams. You just want them to succeed and be all these things. So yeah, I mean that's what it's about.
That's cool. The Places You'll Go by I Fight Dragons from Canon Eyes, available depending on when this airs, now or soon.
Planeswalker Records.
Is that the label?
No, it's not.
Oh. Brought to you by Dark Lotus.
Collabo.
One day I'm going to send you
Dark Lotus.
I'm going to send you a Dark Lotus song that I used as an inspiration for my song Super Scope. The chorus, I used the melody and cadence as an interpolation tribute to my favorite Dark Lotus song. That's a whole nother story.
Last question.
Last question. No, how do you feel like excited to do another record soon, or are you kind of chill now that you have a record out?
Well, I think we got. Yeah, I want to get this officially out. So this is not fully out. We're playing a release show because we don't play that much these days. It's like a lot of work for us to get that stuff together. But I'm excited for it to be fully out and in the world for sure. And then
shorter time between the next two records.
I hope so. Yeah, not another 5 years. You mean?
Well, I don't know.
The fact that the Patreon is there and it's like we've done one, but we could just start doing another one. I think that's exciting to me. And like I would start writing songs again, and we'll kind of see. Hopefully less than 5 years before the next record.
So maybe we can do I asked that we can do a part 2 when that next one's done.
Part 2. I'm in.
Tight. Peace.
What can I tell you of the world when I know I've still got so much to learn? How will I keep you safe? How will you find your place? What can I tell you of the world? I want you to have it all. Want you to trust yourself and fear no fall. Want you to turn out to be so much better than me. I want you to have it all. Oh, the places you'll go with your eyes so wide, with your heart in your hands and your sword at your side. Oh, the mountains you'll move, oh, the tears you'll cry, oh, the places you'll go. Little love of mine. No, I can't promise you'll be safe. I can't promise you won't lose your way. But I promise you now you'll get through it somehow. this song for you to listen to when things go wrong. And then maybe you'll know how I love you so, and find a way to stay strong. Oh, the places you go with your eyes so wide, with your heart in your hand and your sword at your side. Oh, the mountains you'll move, oh, the tears you'll cry, oh, the places you'll go. Little love of mine, oh, the places you'll go. Little love of mine, little love of mine. Oh, the places you'll go with your eyes so wide, with your heart in your hand and your sword at your side. Oh, the mountains you'll move, oh, the tears you'll cry, oh, the places you'll go. Oh, the places you go with your eyes so wide, with your heart in your hand and your sword at your side. Oh, the mountains you'll move, oh, the tears you'll cry, oh, the places you'll go. Little love of mine.
What a great guy. Thank you very much, Brian. I am going to play right now the Patreon Larson of the week. This week we have a special caller from West Virginia who download this song because she saw it on a torrent site, a LimeWire site back in the day. Jessie from West Virginia calls and tells her story. So take it away, Jessie.
Hi, Lars. My name is Jessie, and I am from West Virginia, but I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. So back when I lived in West Virginia, I didn't have a whole lot of access to music. The first time I heard you was download this song because I was just browsing through LimeWire, different genres, looking for things to download, and the title said download this song, and so I did, and I have been a huge fan ever since. Because I lived in the middle of nowhere in West Virginia, I didn't get to see you in person for a very long time, but a friend of mine went to a show, I think in 2009 maybe, and stood in line and called me so that I could talk to you on the phone, and you were so kind and understanding of people like being fans and not being able to be there in person, and it was really wonderful and sweet. And so now that I live in Charlotte, I can see you every time you come through town, which I do. And every show is beautiful, and I appreciate all the things that you do education-wise, and also am super stoked about these new Marvel songs. Thank you. Thank you.
Amazing. That's very kind, and thank you very much for your support and the kind words. We have a special guest next week, Ultra Klystron. He is a rapper and producer who lives in Canada, originally from the US. He's married to Nurse Hella, which some of you might remember from back in the day, the old Nerdcore documentaries. We talk about how he balances his career in tech with his incredibly prolific output of music. So Carl Olson, Ultra Klystron, next week. Thank you all for listening. And I hope to see you at one of the upcoming shows. Also, I want to announce I'm going on tour with Schaefer the Dark Lord in February in the US and some other acts. So stay tuned for that. I'm still doing my Pay What You Want for the MC Lars back catalog, music.mclars.com. And check out the new album, Humble Bundle. It's actually an EP that will be on Spotify sometime soon. Some of the music videos are on my channel, mclars.tv. And that's it. And that's all, man. All right. Thanks for listening. Bye.